This segment brought to you by Sure Crop, liquid crop nutrition delivered right to your farm.
We're back. Now Kyle and Joseph Awika talk about the health benefits of sorghum and its uses as food for people.
Hi, this is Kyle Bauer. I have the opportunity to visit with Joseph Awika. He's with Texas A&M talking about sorghum as a food, or milo as a food, or grain sorghum as a food. My perception, most of the rest of the world, grain sorghum is used as a substitute for corn. Is it the same thing with human food?
Theoretically, yes. Practically, not quite, because there's very little of sorghum that actually ends up in products that corn is used for.
And why is that?
The biggest problem, number one, I think, is because of the functionality of sorghum as a grain compared to corn. The functionality of sorghum is more challenging for food processors. So even if they could get it cheap, it's a little bit difficult to process than corn is.
Would people prefer the products? I mean, sorghum has a lot of health benefits that are brought out. Would people prefer to eat sorghum crops?
Exactly. If the product tasted good, I think sorghum would be probably one of the better selling, if not the best selling grain, because it has all these functional and health benefits that you don't readily get with other grains, including even wheat or rice or corn or anything you can think of. So if we could get a niche where sorghum can function in foods better than other grains, I think it would be a very well-selling food.
Now, you say if it tasted good, what is it that affects the taste of sorghum that makes it not preferable?
Actually, that's a funny thing, because most of the time people confuse, and that's a typical human problem, is that the sensory profile of sorghum tends to be lower than other products, but it's nothing to do with taste. It's mostly to do with the texture of the grain itself. Because when you process with sorghum, it doesn't cook as well as rice or maize under similar conditions. And so you end up with textures that people complain is either gritty, dry, crumbly, or it just doesn't taste right. But it's nothing to do with the actual taste, but more to do with the texture of the product. Because in terms of taste, sorghum doesn't have much. It's kind of like rice, very mild flavored crop, yes.
So are there things that can be done to improve that taste?
Yeah, the functionality, yes. And that is one of the research we are doing, actually, trying to improve the functionality of sorghum, because we know the biggest cause of this reduced functionality is the proteins of sorghum. When you cook sorghum, instead of the proteins actually opening up, they tighten. So in other grains, when you cook them, the proteins open up and allow water to get into the starch, and it makes the food kind of the texture that you use to most products. For sorghum, they tighten up, and so they actually prevent moisture from getting into the flour or whatever you've transformed sorghum into, and that contributes to this dry texture, crumbly texture, and sandiness.
And how are you able to fix that?
There's some proteins. We have found that some sorghums naturally have a protein structure that is different, and this protein structure allows it to absorb water very readily. But this is it's kind of what do you call a recessive trait. It's a trait that it has to be really nurtured to actually get it to the mainstream sorghum, because these sorghums traditionally are very soft. And so if you are to grow it, most of the problem with either you're going to have weathering in the field where it's just going to be attacked by molds, or once you harvest it, it's going to be difficult to process, because you need the grain to be hard in order to process. If it's too soft, you try to process, it just crumbles and you can't get anything out of it. So we are trying to actually take that trait out of the soft grain to put it into a hard grain and make it more commercially viable.
We're visiting with Joseph Awika at Texas A&M. This is Kyle Bauer reporting. Back to you, Jamie.
Thanks, Kyle. Come back after the break for a look at how one producer made his cattle more valuable through technology.
Hey folks, Dr. Dan from Doc Talk. Have you asked yourself, how can I help provide relief to wildfire victims? Well, you can go to the Ashland Community Foundation, or you can go to the Kansas Livestock Association Foundation and make monetary gifts. Another way, you can buy this beautiful print that was painted by Dr. Eva Gardner of the Gardner Angus Ranch of Ashland and Clark County area before the fire. This painting will be sold through the Kansas Livestock Association Foundation, and all proceeds will be provided to victims of the wildfire.